Hi, Dr. David Foreman, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is a cool experience for me. I don't normally get to share this kind of information, so thank you very much for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so this is really cool. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background as a pharmacist and how it led you to be where you are?
Oh man, I have a twisted path compared to most, I think. So my original background, graduated from the University of South Carolina College of Pharmacy in '87. Went into working in independent pharmacy for a couple of years. Had always gone to pharmacy school with the intent of owning my own drugstore. So within 2 years, I opened a medicine shop franchise in Colonial Heights, Virginia, and did real well with it, to the point where we were doing about 400 prescriptions a day in an 8-hour day. Yeah, it was jamming. I had a couple extra. I had a couple of There were always two pharmacists on staff and two technicians when we were at that crazy torrid pace. But during that time frame, a couple of things happened in my life that made my path twist, I guess you'd say, in a positive way. I spent 2 weeks on vacation with my brother-in-law, who was an ex-pro baseball player, and he's one of these guys where his body's a temple. Like he
Mm,
was Mr. Fitness. I mean, even now, I think he's 15 years, so he's probably pushing 70, and he looks like he's 45. And
wow.
yeah, so it's a cool person to hang around with. At the same time, of learning more about, like, he was really into herbs and vitamins and eating right. And I got to say, I had a little envy going on with he never seemed to lack energy. He looked amazing. Yeah, and so you combine that with my pharmacy business was killing it, but the HMOs were really starting to take a foothold, at least in the part of the country I was in, and some margins were shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
Even I think I made more money the year I did $1 million in gross sales than I did when I made 2.5 million in sales. So just
Wow.
to, just to give you the example of how much the margins really changed, and I started becoming disenchanted. And he happened to work with actually an MLM company that had a full line of nutritional supplements, and he told me I could make a 60% margin on these over the counter items. And compared to selling, brand named OTCs for either a loss or a break even, just, the idea of making 60% profit on an item was appealing to me. So
Yeah.
I started, sort of practicing a little what he preached for my own health.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I liquidated about a third of I had an apothecary style, so liquidated about a third of my OTCs and put in a full line of, herbs and vitamins and homeopathics, and didn't know anything. So he connected me with an RN. And that was really the stepping off point for me, because here was a fellow, healthcare provider, healthcare professional who was able to take what back then was just kind of this esoteric pixie dust concept I had on what natural medicine was, and really, you know, give me some good science to look at, give me some good places to go to substantiate that this stuff wasn't just weed, seeds, and nuts. Um, and then read a few books, but that was really, like, I guess my stepping off point was my brother-in-law, his influence, and then me. I don't like just to have things in my store at that time, and I'm a person who doesn't. I don't know if it's double negative. So I like to know. I don't like to be ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
So having these products, and just my customers could see this change in my inventory, and I didn't know anything, so it was kind of embarrassing. So it sort of fueled me to start educating myself, and that was really the beginning. And I don't want to make a soliloquy out of this, so I'm gonna let you talk too.
No, this is great. You're kind of answering all the questions I had, like how you got into it, what was the turning point. So you can go ahead. So how did you get into learning more about the herbs and vitamins? What form did you sell them in? Was it all standardized extracts? Was it tinctures? Was it loose herbs? How did you manage that part?
So if you think about it, let's see. My son is 22. I got into it about a year and a half before he was born. So 24 years ago, um, the space of natural health, natural medicine isn't even close to what it is today. There was very little standardization. Um, I'd say 99% of the products that were on the market were just, the whole herbs blended together in, different formats. A lot of, the things that I had were based on, First Nation tribes from Canada or Native Americans here or, Chinese medicine, Ayurveda,
Hmm.
the things that have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years. That's where most of it was. And I think that anything that had real science in the herbal space ended up being a drug.
Hmm.
Like, think about digitalis, coming from foxglove. You know, um, it, there were certain things like that that ended up being a drug, and that's where pharmacognosy, originated. Was, wow, people using these plants, and what made it tick, and so a lot of the herbs back then that had that kind of efficacy ended up being drugs. They figured out what made that drug or that plant work. They extracted that chemical, and boom, we had a medication. So it wasn't really until probably 15 years into my 10 years into my gig, so to speak, that we were getting some good information out of Europe on standardization. I think that's probably where it all started. But yeah, when I started, man, it was trippy. I mean, there were some really um, sketchy things going on in the natural product industry. And, the fight, I think the fight slash plight was um, bringing credibility to the industry. And so people loved me because I was like the freak pharmacist that was into this stuff. And now, like it was before it was cool. Now it's cool to be, this holistic functional medicine pharmacist. But man, I was a bastard. I was, am I allowed to use that word on your?
Sure, why not?
Right. I mean, I was treated so poorly by our colleagues in pharmacy when I got into this. Like I was a traitor.
Oh my God.
I lost my mind. I didn't, my comment back without being a jerk was, you may not believe in this now, but one day when modern medicine begins to fail you, you're going to come back to me and ask for help.
Yeah, when
So
it begins to crumble.
like I'll give you an idea. Like when I remember I had a huge vitamin section, but there were all those free chemical isolates. They weren't natural vitamins, and the
Uh,
natural came out, and people were like, "Oh my God, they're so much better." And then I remember like the first omega-3 products that came out on the market, and oh my gosh, it was like pandemonium and Pandora's box colliding, I guess you could say, with just good, bad, and ugly all at the same time. So I feel like I'm so glad where the space is now. It was chaotic before.
nice. So what is your preferred either brand or line of supplements, or like how has that evolved from the beginning? Like what's your stance now about crude versus standardized extracts, for example?
I have mixed feelings. Maybe it's good that I'm a Gemini because I have two personalities. So I always say like I had the pharmacist hat and then the naturopathic hat, and it depends. In all honesty, with standardization, there's been several instances in my time where they standardized an herb to a particular chemical entity, phytochemical entity, and then they figured out really that wasn't what made it tick. So
Absolutely.
there's been errors, there. When I go back to like my purist self, which it's truly an internal struggle, to be honest with you. It really is a struggle. I like to use the whole herb. I'm really into whole foods. Getting your nutrition that way. I don't feel like we were designed to get our anything from an isolate or a concentrated blah picket. You know what I mean? Um, Yet, having said that, standardization when they get it right is where we really get the medicine part of natural to me. If we really have dialed in and they've done the clinical research, now clinical studies are starting to pop up everywhere on herbs that have been used for thousands of years. I just spoke at I spoke in front of like 15,000 people on Thursday in North Carolina, and I was talking about an oil extract that came from black cumin seeds, which had been used for thousands of years. I mean, they were found in King Tut's tomb. They were found in, mentioned in the Quran, the Bible. So I mean, these things go back thousands of years, and it wasn't until the 1960s where scientists were like, wow, that's really cool. Let's see if we can figure out what makes it work. And so now you see all these like black seed oil products on the market, and you test the functionality, and they're all over the freaking map. And one Israeli company decided to like dig deeper into finding out like there's more than one chemical compound. Everybody isolated thymoquinone, not realizing like free fatty acids and other compounds had an effect on, if fatty acids were high, the thymoquinone didn't work. And so standardization is good when we have science to back it up, and that's where you get more of those medicinal effects. And so I'll use more standardized extracts when I know I'm working with someone that really needs to have that benefit. You need like, if you're suffering with migraines or, pick a health challenge and you want a faster effect, I will go to standardized extracts that have the clinical research to show that, yeah, if you take 125 milligrams of that, this is the effect you should be getting, and this is the percentage of the time you get it. So I go back and forth.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm definitely more on the side of like the whole herb and whole foods approach as well, having trained as an herbalist.
Yeah.
But that's really cool that you use both when it's warranted. And part of the reason that you could use both is that you're trained as a naturopathic doctor, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was sort of an afterthought, to be honest with you. I did it because I wanted to kind of validate, not to anybody else, but to me, like that everything I had self-learned was accurate. And I was living in a state that didn't license it, so I've never become licensed. I don't really see people as clients or patients. I spend the only time I really help people out is when they really have something weird, freaky going on that modern medicine seems to have failed, and then I'll go into my functional medicine role at looking at the person as a whole and trying to help figure out like what the root of their issue is. I talked about migraines earlier. I mean, good Lord, that's probably one of the hardest issues or challenges to help people with. And they're frustrated and want relief, and yet what's causing their migraine could be food sensitivities. Well, there's no herb on the planet that's going to do anything for that. Maybe herbs that help gut health because their sensitivities because of gut, but like that's one of the probably most challenging. Asthma's another one where good Lord, you've got to dig so far down and modern medicine does rule it out, right? And as a naturopath, functional medicine person, that's my thing. And I try to only do that, like I said, with people that have just really they're messed up. Modern medicine's kind of failed them. And then I and I don't even charge for it. I just offer my services. I don't sell anything. I feel like I have pity and mercy on those people and, try to give them guidance. And at the end of the day, as pharmacists, we're healthcare providers, professionals. And I've been beating people up with this word lately. There's two words in healthcare, and the second part is care. And so if we so many people, especially in the natural health space, I feel like are so focused on the dollar, whether it's natural health or modern medicine. I feel like we're so focused on the dollar that we lose sight of the care and the healthcare part of it. And to put some of the products that I see on the market nowadays that are they have like a whiff of what the clinical study said, substantiated its efficacy. They only have they have 25% of that in there, but they use it as the name just to promote it. Are you really caring for somebody? No, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to care about everybody's health. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's definitely a lot of things I would personally change about the healthcare system today. And I think America, with the amount of money that we spend on it, I think we could do a lot better if we restructure certain things for sure.
Yeah, I mean, in this space of natural medicine, I feel like more and more people are embracing it, but there really aren't a lot of places that are truly like integrating it, and my college of pharmacy, I have submitted a curriculum upon their request to teach a 2 hour, not 2 hour elective on basically teaching pharmacy students how to do functional medicine. And it's with the background that we get with, biochemistry, physiology, and doing things naturally is not as challenging as it may seem. I used to think when people would say, Dave, I want to be, I want to be an herbal pharmacist too. And I'd be like, there's no possible way I could teach you what I've learned over the last 25 years.
Right.
And now I stepped back and I'm like, actually I can. It's actually a lot easier than I don't want to make it sound that way, but it's a lot easier than you would think. Like it is definitely learning a whole new career, but having the background we all got, from our college background really makes it a lot easier to get up to speed, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. I found the same thing because we're not starting from zero. We already have the foundation. We're just going to learn another way, another path to reach a certain goal. So it's better. It's like getting more tools in your toolbox. You have the ones already from the Western side, and now you're adding from traditional medicine, that has been around for ages, like you said. So on the one hand, it's the age-old question, is there scientific evidence behind it? But on another hand, there's historical evidence behind it that has been used and it seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you asked me a question a while ago, and I think I blew right on past it of like, what brands do I recommend? And I really don't like to get into that, to be honest with you. I feel like because there are a lot of really good brands out there, and there's also still quite a few bad ones out there. The ones that I feel like are, and it's funny because like 20 years ago when I was, into this for 5 to 7 years or however long it was, and I remember, being at conventions and, there'd be a negative story that came out on the natural product industry and, we'd all be like, gosh, sakes, because, we were all trying to do it right.
Yeah.
And, the saying was the cream will eventually rise to the top. And I swear to God, it's been the slowest rising cream on the planet, man. I still can't even make butter with it. I mean, come on. But I feel like, more and more, companies are trying to rely on evidence-based, I guess is probably a good way to say it, evidence-based products. Companies that have been around for 50 years, does that mean they're still doing it right? No, it doesn't. I remember when I was getting out of college and this pharmacist was like, I forget, he was like really in my face. I was not even out of college yet. I was doing a rotation at a VA hospital and this guy had a real attitude. He dropped on me and he's like, yeah, I've got 32 years experience and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and the sad thing is, granted, experience can be something to a lot of people. It can give you wisdom. But in all honesty, I knew more than he did. I mean, I'm not being cocky. It's just so, sometimes that how many years have you been around doesn't necessarily mean you're still doing it right. My grandfather taught me years ago, there's a shyster in every business, and there are. I look for companies that use the therapeutic ingredient, like use the therapeutic doses. I mean, as pharmacists, if someone gets a prescription for, 1 milligram of furosemide, is that really going to do anything? Right? I mean, sorry, that's a really good example though, right?
Yeah.
Like
They don't make it like that.
yeah, I mean, so we know what the therapeutic dose probably beginning on a patient of furosemide is. I mean, granted, old school drugs still used, but So it's the same thing in the natural health field. So when I look at like if you're buying from a generic company and all they sold was 1 milligram furosemide, would you trust their products? I wouldn't. I'd be like, are we working with infants? Is that it? I mean, then why are they in tablets? You know, that kind of stuff. And
Right.
it's the same thing in the natural health space. I feel like, we need to educate ourselves about the science, and it really is there. And then make sure that, and if a company's like putting a whiff, or my other favorite is proprietary blend, it's not really telling me what's in there. To me, it's like, what are you hiding? Are you, and don't give me this crap about synergy. If you're going to claim synergy, then you got to prove to me you have synergy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to know which ingredients make it synergistic. What makes it tick?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because like 15 years ago, I was doing a lot of speaking for the chain Vitamin Shop. At one point, I was their like medical advisor and spokesperson. I did that for 9 years, and I used to teach people to buy products that had a shotgun approach. Multiple ingredients that were all for the same condition, but had a different mechanism of action. And I did preach synergy back then, and I realized that part of that was true, but it wasn't proven, because the root of why, like I talked about headache, the root of why I have a headache could be different for anybody. So like using 4 to 6 different ingredients that all work on that, but in a different way, sounds like a great idea. The problem was a lot of people knowledge now, again, we're always learning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure yeah, I mean, as an herbalist, I mean, you see that, I'm sure, as well. Like, there's often times where you're not just going to recommend one herb and use a whiff of it, right? I mean,
yeah, I think it's like the art of, I mean, we're not allowed to say diagnosis, but that's pretty much what it comes down to. Like, if you could figure out what is the cause, you could figure out what would most fit and help that mechanism. But if you don't know, then yeah, you probably most likely will start off with a shotgun approach to see if something will help, and then maybe you could narrow down from there.
yeah, I mean, but I think that there's an awful lot of, anyway, I don't want to,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm painting a negative picture right now. And I can tell you that, the segue from pharmacist to, this, I mean, I travel around the world now educating. It used to be just consumers, and now I'm, speaking at conferences, and I mean, I'm going to Singapore in a couple of weeks to speak at a convention, and my topic is stress, and I'm teaching people how to formulate, for stress. I mean, I'm not going to sell the product, but they're going to trying to get people to stop thinking in this linear path. And I mean, you see it with what you do. There's so much good that comes out of this, and it's not a stretch for us as pharmacists to get there. It just takes a little bit of effort, and a lot of passion, I guess, because you seem, based on our emails back and forth, you seem like you're very passionate about what you do, and just the fact that you're taking like a lot of your time out of your life to create these podcasts of pharmacists. It's such a cool thing to be a part of.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I agree with you. I think pharmacists have like this natural role to fill or to expand on our already, the role in the apothecary in retail. We're already selling these products, so we should be educated about them. And even those pharmacists that may not think it works, first of all, did they get educated and, to see whether or not it works? Second of all, the consumer is still what's driving the market. So they're going to buy it regardless of whether or not you recommend it. So you can educate yourself to that end and recommend something that at least won't hurt them, something from your clinical side that you can add to as an advisor in the shop.
Well, and it's funny because every year I get invited back to my College of Pharmacy to talk to the pharmacy students, and the interesting thing is like they don't have to show up, but I always have like a room of like 125 to 150 students, that want to hear, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? And one of the last things I say to them is, you don't have to believe in this. You can think everything I'm saying is just a bunch of crap. But the reality is that your patients, whether you're in a hospital setting, retail setting, I mean, pick any of the possible settings that you could be in. Your patients are using this stuff,
right?
And if you if you blow them off and give them that whole negativity thing, then they're not going to share information with you. They're not going to share, and that sharing is necessary so that there may be drug interactions. There may be a reason why their medicine's not working as well, or there may be a reason that their blood pressure medicine's working too well now, and maybe no, seriously. Then they need to go back to their healthcare provider and go from 20 milligrams of lisinopril down to 10, or so to me, that's like one of the biggest things is like, you don't have to believe it, but understand that your patients are, and you need to at least be open to it because they're using it, and shame on you if someone gets hurt, and they could get hurt because they become hypotensive and, stand up out of their chair, fall and hit their head because they were hypotensive because you weren't paying attention to them saying, hey, I'm taking hawthorn and garlic, and these things support my blood pressure. Those are just a simplistic example of why we need to be open to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe. So as healthcare providers, I think it just benefits everybody to get educated on all the things that people are using and is out there. And some things could actually be more cost effective than what we're doing now, which ties back to our earlier remark on the healthcare system.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so how you said you got into the naturopathic doctor role because you wanted to kind of continue your self-education. So was it worth it, and how did you do it? How did you take an online program or in person?
So I did an online program that's no longer around. Back then it was accredited, but for whatever reason they're no longer in business. And I wasn't hung on getting a title. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that my own self-education, in all honesty, I felt like it exceeded. And I have a lot of friends that went the very traditional route, going to like Bastyr and those kinds of schools. And, my online thing was, what I got out of it, because what I put in, I get out, was at least as good. In all honesty, I definitely can go toe to toe on the knowledge base. But with any career, there's pharmacists who know more about type 2 diabetes. There's some that know more about cancer therapy. Same thing in naturopathic medicine. I have colleagues that are more specialized in certain areas. So would I call myself an herbalist anymore? Heck no, man. Like I so appreciate what you do because your knowledge base goes far deeper than mine in that space. And that's actually one of my biggest pieces of advice for people that are watching your podcast or listening is, this may seem overwhelming to, go from full gear pharmacist into some place in this natural world. And, keep in mind, you didn't learn your pharmacy overnight. And my biggest piece of advice is for people to take an area of medicine that you have a passion about. You're passionate about cardiovascular disease because you have family history, or you're passionate about joint health because you have your own knee problems, or you're passionate about, like in my pharmacy, I was like the top selling pharmacy in the country for a blood glucose monitor. I focused on diabetes before it was cool to do. And in all honesty, I focused on diabetes because diabetics spent like 3 times the amount in a pharmacy that anybody else did. So, so yeah, there was a greed factor back then. But like I tell people, like focus in on one area, learn it, become the expert on the natural part of that space, and then you can broaden it, because what'll happen is that person with type 2 diabetes will get your advice, and you're going to help them with changing their diet, getting a better activity program, some supplements that help with insulin resistance and maybe help the pancreas produce more insulin, blah blah blah, block glucose from being absorbed into the bloodstream, those kinds of things. But they're overweight, so eventually then you're gonna probably want to learn about things that you can do to help people that have type 2 diabetes to lose weight, or they're more prone to have metabolic syndrome. So, and eventually what'll happen is your window of expertise will go from, here, and then I don't want to go outside the screen, but, but yeah, it'll keep growing. And that way it's not that daunting, overwhelming thing of, geez, man, I gotta be something to everybody. There's nothing wrong with telling people you don't know, and, or I can find out. And, then and I don't know about you, my dear, but in pharmacy school, we had a 0 credit class, 1 hour a week, and it was on how to look stuff up.
Yeah, we call it drug info.
Whatever it was called.
I remember. Credits.
Yeah, that might have been the title of it. I can just remember, like it's one of those classes like when you're a kid of like, why do I have to take algebra?
Yeah.
And that class was like, really? But it was probably the most valuable class I had, to be honest with you, because we can't know everything, so you have to know where to go look things up. And I like being a resource for people, so you can start with me.
Thank you. Well, that's a really good point and advice for people. And I think pharmacists have a hard time wrapping their minds around this advice because I feel like we're the jack of all trades. We know a little bit about everything, and we usually don't specialize like doctors. So this is like a really good idea, what you're saying, to think about it as specializing and then broadening.
Well, think about it. Like, so I was this is how old I am. I was like the last class to not have the PharmD requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, the PharmD requirement, then you are having that, specialty in geriatrics, or, I mean, you pick it, I know there's an abundance. So it's a little easier, I think, for PharmDs to wrap their head around it because, your PharmD program probably had that specialty component to it. And so maybe that's where you focus your energy. Geriatrics is a big thing, especially I'm the last year of the baby boomers. And so, of course, there's this big talk about my baby boomer population and the age, and I'm probably one of the exceptions to the rule, but baby boomers are like generally overweight and not motivated to really do anything. And they're pretty cool with just popping their prescription. So that, they're cool with taking their blood sugar lowering medication so they can keep eating chocolate glazed donuts, and the younger generation is like, my daughter's a freshman in college, and they're so flipping opposite of what like I hear from my age bracket and a little bit above. They are proactive, they want to eat healthy, they want to get exercise. My daughter hates sweating, but she still goes to the gym because she doesn't want to be like, other people. I'll just say it that way.
Yeah, no, I find that a lot in actually the pharmacy community. I feel like because we know all there is about drugs, including the not so positive aspects and the side effects, like I personally, that's why I got into this field, because I want to avoid taking, all these drugs and have like a more proactive and preventative approach so that to prevent myself from getting the diseases and having to take the drugs. But
yeah, I mean, that is a good motivating factor. And, when I spoke at 2 pharmacy conventions in July, one in Nashville and one in Vegas, and they were both community pharmacy based. So there were no chain drugs, no hospital. It was strictly people or employees of community pharmacies. And one of the things that I tried to also drive home is I feel like when we get into this whole conversation of natural medicine, people think that, just like with a drug, I take it for my hypertension and it's going to work by the next day, maybe that day, but hopefully by after the first full day of it. And, in natural health and natural medicine, my focus, or one thing I try to teach pharmacists and other healthcare providers, is that one of the biggest issues we have as pharmacists in the community is patient compliance. And that's why a lot of people still have their health issues, is they're not compliant. And if you look at why they're not compliant, it's because of side effects. That's the number one thing, honestly, and or they're just tired of popping pills. And so when we get into the natural medicine space, if I could have you after 30, 60, 90 days by using whatever I suggest, have a positive effect at lowering I use blood pressure again, then I could have a dosage reduction. I may go from that 20 milligrams down to 10, And because of that, now I don't have the side effects. I don't have, with, men or women, libido reduction, or, I mean, we all know the side effects from the drugs. So for me, like, my first objective for people taking things natural is to, let's try to get some dosage reduction going here, so that I have patient compliance, because the lower dose won't upset their stomach or make them feel this or make them feel that. Because the consumer's like, man, every time I take a drug, it's good for one thing and it gives me 10 other things,
Absolutely.
And so that's goal number one, dosage reduction. Goal number two is, maybe we can get off our medication, but let's be realistic. Let's start with at least making you feel better while you take your medication.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's talk a little bit about you as a practitioner. You said that you don't charge for it, or how does it work? Do you see people in the pharmacy still and just consult them over the counter, or do you see people, as a private practice?
No, actually, I don't see people at all. We're doing this from my small office at home. I actually work out of the house. The only time I truly would see somebody is, again, if I run into them or they reach out to me through my website and they really just have something, bizarre going on health-wise. I have some really cool stories of, like, a guy I met in a TV. My career right now is I guest appear on television and radio programs all over the country. I'm a guest speaker at many different types of conventions, not just here in the U.S., but all over the world, on an abundance of topics, going back to pharmacy. I know all the health challenges. So if, it's not hard for me to integrate and go and talk about whatever topic it is. And I do a lot of writing for many different publications. I actually stopped writing my blog because I was doing so much writing for everybody else. And then I also consult for some of the raw material companies that have patented trademarked ingredients, and help them educate B2B, or even B2C, so people understand. But for me to actually see people as a, quote, patient client, I maybe do that or help people, maybe 5 to 10 people a year. And I don't charge because I don't know. I don't know why I don't charge. There was a period in time where, I was charging hundreds of dollars for an initial consult, because the initial consult took a couple hours. It wasn't like going to the doctor's office, man. It was a full evaluation. I had a 12-page survey you had to fill out, with yes/no questions. We were looking at, looking at you on a functional medicine basis. And for now, just because I have a real open heart for people that are really suffering. I mean, I have an open heart for everybody, but I really have that weakness for people that are really suffering and frustrated, and need that added help. And that's why I just do it for free. It's also kind of part, I don't want to get into the spirituality part, but for me, it's part of my religious beliefs as well. Giving is a big thing for me, and giving doesn't necessarily have to mean money. And so for me, my spiritual walk is really important. I actually teach and created a philosophy called 4 Pillars of Health, and their diet, exercise, spirituality, and supplementation. I feel like, you need all 4 in balance to really be healthy. So, but yeah, going back to your thing, it's a random thing. I most of the consultations I'll do over the phone or via email, or, I'll run into people that I can do a quick thing with and have them look into some certain things. But I gave up. I got burned out on it because I got tired of people coming to me for help and not doing what I had suggested, and then complaining that it didn't work.
Right.
I'm sure you see that all the time, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to have like the golden middle where, like, you give them just enough motivation and like advice for them to follow through with it and not get overwhelmed, but not too little that they think like, oh, that's so simple, it won't work, so they don't do it.
No, it is. You're right. It's a delicate balance, and it's funny because I just got so frustrated, and I even reached out to people. I mean, I really got upset. Like, I would get mad, and luckily I'm past that now. I don't get mad and get upset, but I reached out to other people that did consultations. I'm like, how do you not get ticked off? Like, I'd be so PO'd, and and they're like, just like, just don't worry about it. Like, it's their life. It's not yours. So, you can't, I found myself wanting it more than they did,
Yeah, absolutely.
because
Yeah,
I know it works. Like, I know this stuff works. And, but the other thing is, like, people are comfortable in their misery.
absolutely. Yeah, they need to, again, it's compliance related as
Yeah.
well, and also motivation. So it's like, and I guess faith in that, in you as a practitioner or in themselves, because some people are afraid that they will fail. So they'd rather fail preemptively, because they're like, I'll fail anyway, so I might as well just not spend money and time on it.
Yeah. No, it's very
Okay.
true. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So yeah, you mentioned what you do now. So how did you get into all that you do now? Like, how did you first start getting invited to be a speaker? How did that all unfold?
So it goes back to when I owned my pharmacy, and when I felt, I read several books, and I originally started out just herbal. That's where the Herbal Pharmacist trademark came from.
Hmm.
And so when I became comfortable enough with my knowledge base, spending time on the phone with the RN and reading, I started teaching after hours classes in my pharmacy. So I closed at 6. At 6:30, I'd have a class for an hour. And one of my customers was in charge of the adult education classes at a local community college. So she asked me if I would come teach at the community college and teach just a basic class on herbs. And so that was the beginning right there. I had a class, Herbs 1, and then the people that took that wanted a more in depth. So as I had to teach, I had to learn. So it forced me to learn a deeper dive into the herbs, and so then they had Herbs 1 and Herbs 2. Um, that led to local radio station in Richmond, Virginia, reaching out to me to be a last minute guest on an Ask the Expert talk show, and it was such a huge hit. They made me a regular in their Ask the Expert cycle. Led me to having my own weekend talk radio show. Led me to being on satellite radio 5 days a week, 2 hours a day at one point. And so everything kind of, one thing led to another. I started getting asked to speak at the local home and garden club, and the Medical College of Virginia finally had asked me to come in and talk to their pain management people. So it was just like one thing led to another. And at one point I hired a publicist, and she got me speaking engagements at like the Oncology Nursing Society convention, Virginia Dental Convention, Michigan Dental Convention. And it's just one of those things that one person sat in on a talk, and next thing that led to a talk somewhere else. And I think the one thing that's led to my career expanding that way is that I've never really been attached to a finished product. I always tell people I'm the product, and no, I am, and education is really what I am. So I have this extra, besides the credibility of pharmacy, which of course we're the number one, like, most respected profession, but I also have this thing where I'm not selling your product. I'm here to educate. And so now I've become like this internationally recognized third party expert. And that's why, TV news programs have me on, because they know I'm not just going to be there to pawn a product that I sell. I'm there to help people. But yeah, it was a 20-year road that went like this. It wiggled all over the place. And it's such a blessing now. I mean, the stuff I get to go and see, it's just mind blowing. If you told me 20 years ago that I would have spoken inside the Greensboro Coliseum to 16,000 people and it was like a rock concert, wow, I would have said you've been smoking crack too long. It was just amazing. Yeah, humbling that anybody would want to hear me speak, and to have like 16,000 people was just incredible.
Wow. So now a not so modest question. So you said you don't make a living on the consultations. So what brings you then the most income from what you do now?
Mostly consulting with the raw material companies, the companies I consult with so there would be companies that have patented, clinically substantiated ingredients that go into the finished product supplements that people buy at the health food store. That's the majority of my income comes from working with them as a consultant to, prepare, I like from writing up their white papers, to writing, creating their PowerPoints for their sales team to use. So I basically am taking their scientific information. Granted, the pharmacy brain pays off there. And I call myself a sales engineer, which is taking their scientific information and making it digestible to the marketing and sales team and or to the customer they're calling on, and if need be to the end consumer customer of that person, of that company. So the majority of it comes from that. I'm not selling a product. I'm not really representing. But like, I'll give you an example. Next week, I'm doing a webinar for a company that I actually reached out to them looking for some research on their ingredient. It's a French company, and they're now having me do a webinar. And I'm transparent. They're paying me a couple $1,000s for an hour time. That's not a bad gig. I mean, I did have to redo their PowerPoint. I didn't like what they had, so I had to, tweak it. But, and that's a one-off deal. Most of the companies I try to get a, regular monthly honorarium or whatever, it pays me regularly. But like speaking at the pharmacy convention, I was paid by those conferences to come in and speak, travel, and then an honorarium. I went to Israel to shoot a short documentary back in February, so I got paid to do that as well. But it's all on a consulting basis. It's usually B, meaning the raw material people, and again, that have patented, trademark, clinically substantiated ingredients. Like the French company, they have 9 human clinical trials. That's pretty darn good. Yeah, that's pretty darn good. I mean, no, they're not with 2,000 people each, like a drug, but they did have crossover. They did, and some of them are double blind. So, what I'm doing now isn't too far off from pharmacy. Just I'm still educating, like you do when you're practicing pharmacy.
Mm-hmm. It's just, I think, challenging to wrap our heads around too, like the people with the non-conventional roles, how to get a steady paycheck if you quit the retail aspect. How do you make sure that your consultancy will have a steady output and input every month, or how you said it, like that you try to get like a monthly thing going, and then you have the side gigs?
Well, in all honesty, I've mentored a lot of people, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was, in my 20s. And so, for me, I always tell people to follow their passion. And when you do your passion, then usually the money will come. And I think the difference is when you truly have to be the entrepreneur, and which means that you have to learn to ask. I could continue to do. And you also have to know when to say no. Like people reach out to me all the time and want me to do consultations, and I just say no. I'm like, here's a few little snippets for you, but I'm not doing that right now. And then so I'm giving up hundreds of dollars to do that, but it's not my passion, Mm-hmm. And so you're going from, you provide a service, you fill the prescription, whatever it is, and you get paid. In this case, you have to figure out what your value is, and you have to ask people to pay you for it, because you spend a lot of time. That's money. You spend a lot of money probably to get educated. That's more money. There's a value to that. Just like going to pharmacy school. I mean, why do pharmacists make 6 figures coming out of college? Because it's not easy. It's worth something, and that's probably the biggest thing, is to learn to have that, be able to ask and tell people what you're worth, I mean, and that's where the money comes from. I've learned, I just sent a proposal off to someone today, and they're like, what do you charge per day? And I'm like, $1,250 a day. That's my norm right there. Every now and then I can get more, but with this 1 hour webinar, $2,000 for I probably spent 4 hours total. That's not a bad gig. $500 an hour, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So, but you have to know what your value is, and then you have to stick to it and be able to say no too, but be able to say yes.
Wow, that's a really good point. So what are your favorite natural medicine resources? Because we talked a little bit about drug info before.
I have one that's really where I go to when I want to really find out the clinical, and it's a natural database. If you go to naturaldatabase.com, they have multiple portals there. I did the healthcare professional one. You pay for it. So you get a login and all that stuff. And So you wanted to look up any nutritional ingredient, they'll have a monograph on it, and the monograph is heavily documented with the clinical that goes behind the statement that's made. So as a pharmacist, that's the real nerdy approach, but that appeals to my pharmacy brain. So when I wrote an article for a huge publication for my speaking engagement in Singapore in September, and it's on stress, and they came back and they're like, we need the references for these. And I'd accidentally just left them out. And so it was really easy for me to find them, but Natural Database is the number one source I'd use for pharmacists and doctors because it appeals to our science brain. It really is. It's written like a monograph on a drug. And the cool thing is just you can click on the reference. It'll take you down to the reference, and it may have a hyperlink to the abstract. And if not, you can just cut and paste what the reference was and then do a Google search to find the exact information. But that's really my number one. It's probably the only thing I use. I don't trust like Healthline. I don't trust Dr. Axe. I don't trust Dr. Mercola because I've seen too many mistakes on those websites. Like I have to fact check those. I try not to use any retail sites because the retail sites there's a method to their madness. They're there to sell products. So, you can't just accept it because it's there and they said it is. You have to take those facts and then search one layer deeper. But I really don't have any print. I use almost all internet, and but that's usually where I'll start with the Natural Database. I'll also see what other people are saying, but then I have to fact check everything because there's so much like I wrote a continuing ed for Pharmacy Times, and it was on omega-3s. It came out last September. And I wanted to see what other people were saying. And when I checked the references weren't even accurate to the topic they were making a claim. It was just like they put references to make it look good. And that was very disenchanting. It made me actually quite upset.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, but I love that website myself.
You do? Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left. So I'd like to ask you, what drives and motivates you to do the work that you do, and what's your mission?
So my mission has been the same for a long time. It's to help as many people as I can achieve the health they lost or maintain the health that they have, including whatever vitality means to you. I like to use all forms of media to do that. I am driven by helping people. End of story. For me, my passion is really just helping people. And like pharmacy, when it became not fun anymore, I stopped doing it. Even though I was still making a really nice income, it wasn't fun. I wasn't doing any good. And so I left. And I went to having no income for quite some time. But for me, it's really just about helping people and enjoying the time while I am doing it. That if it's not fun, I won't do it. End of story. Like I can't, even if I'm helping people, fun to me means it feels good to me, and the minute it becomes work, I probably won't do it anymore. I'll find something else to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you like feel aligned to your calling, so that's what you go towards.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to the whole thing I said earlier about follow your passion, the money will come. Yeah. It's just there's always that fear factor involved with that. So it's like the Indiana Jones thing where he's looking down and it looks like he's going to fall off, and the rocks matched up. And it's that whole fear of taking that first step. And once you get off that first step and you learn, hey, I can make a few bucks, or I can still support myself and feel good about what I do. I mean, if you're practicing pharmacy now and you feel good about what you do, then why change? Just expand your knowledge base for either personal or for your family's health.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I have a few rapid fire questions also for them.
I'll keep it tight then. Go for it.
Okay, tight. Number one thing listeners can do to improve their health right now.
Start. Seriously, start. Do something. Improve your activity. Get more spiritually grounded. Start taking supplements that maybe address family history. And or hey, we all know how to eat right. Why don't we do it? So just one of those four things. Do it. Start it now.
Great. What's a hobby or favorite pastime of yours?
I'm a golfer. I'm a competitive golfer. I'm starting back to play amateur golf as a senior, which is kind of humbling to say those words. But I love golf. I love to travel. And I love my kids. My kids are 22 and 18. And I just have a blast with them. And I just got remarried, and I love just hanging out with my wife, going to the beach. We live 2 blocks away from the beach. So yeah, there you go. That's a quick.
Nice. Thank you. All right. What's your favorite beverage?
I love wine. But I drink water most of the time. Like, that's my main thing. But I really do love a good glass of wine, to be straight up with people. I'm transparent. So, but water, green tea. That's it.
Fermented resveratrol. Why not?
Yeah, right on. Right on, baby.
All right. So lastly, how can listeners get in touch with you or learn more about your brand and the Herbal Pharmacist?
One stop, herbalpharmacist.com, HERBAL, and then pharmacist like we are.com. And contact us means me, myself, and I. So if you hit that, it's just going to me anyway. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn connections are all there as well. And I really thank you for what you're doing, my dear. You really are a blessing to our profession that you're taking time out of your life to do this. So obviously you've got a passion behind it.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your, everything you've shared with us and all your great advice. I'm sure the listeners will appreciate it.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're very expensive, so we're getting a freebie here, people.
No, whatever.
Right, take care, David. Have a great day.
See you. Bye.